Good afternoon, everyone. We are now in Numbers chapter 3. Now, just recall in our first two chapters of the book of Numbers, we have come from the end of the book of Exodus, and then we skipped Leviticus, and then we came into Numbers. And Numbers really is a historical or a chronological continuation of the book of Exodus. However, in this chapter, we will soon see that many things may have happened in between Exodus and Numbers, where the book of Leviticus we have recorded certain incidences which chapter 3 today will refer to. And so let's bear that in mind and let's begin. It says, these are the records. The idea of records here really is the genealogy. But the genealogy here that is stated is of Aaron and Moses. And you could see here that it was Moses when the Lord spoke. When the Lord spoke to them with Moses on Mount Sinai. So this is the background here. And it is important for us to understand that the names of the descendants of Aaron is important because of the Levites. And because of the Levites, then you would find that the Levites themselves are a continuation from the sons of Jacob in Genesis chapter 49 and 50. And so with that, we can actually connect that story and probably to discover the chronology, particularly of the line of Levi, because that is the only one that has been mentioned in further detail from the book of Genesis. Now, understand this, when we get into the genealogy, it is of Aaron and is not of Moses. It says these are the names of the sons of Aaron. Notice, these are the Bnei Aaron. And it's not of Moses. Why? Because Aaron is the eldest. And so, firstborn, if you recall. And as firstborn, Aaron represents the tribe of Levi, but not only the tribe of Levi, but the descendants of the Kohen, which is the priest. And it is important in this chapter because in chapter 2, when we talked about the census, the numbering of the children of Israel of 20 years and above, who are able to go to war and who are males, they actually represent the 12 tribes of Israel minus Levi. And the only way of making 12 groups of people is that Joseph is not numbered, but Joseph's children, Manasseh and Ephraim, were included as part of the 12. And hence you get 12 tribes of Israel from that standpoint, from the standpoint of an army of the nation of Israel. And I've also alluded to the fact that those genealogies of the 20-year and above of male descent are the way to dictate lineage as well as inheritance of the promised land eventually. And because the Levites were excluded from that count of 600 over 1,000 people, now in chapter 3, God says, we will count the Levites, but they're not counting all the Levites. The first names to be counted is Aaron. And with Aaron, we have Nadav, his firstborn, and Avihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. These are 4 sons of Aaron. And Aaron is called the anointed priests. Now, what do you mean by the anointed priests? Well, this one here is that these are the priests who have been, well, anointed, rubbed with oil. And I guess you can say that they are consecrated. God has set them apart as priests. And so the Kohen is an important concept. Priest in this case is a concept where I guess we seldom talked about, but I guess in passing, we would say that the priest is one who actually has been appointed by God to actually represent him to do certain tasks in the tabernacle. And with this, it would have to do with the rituals, right? With the rituals. The word anointed, on the other hand, is from a word that we might be familiar with. It comes from the word mashach, and where we get the word Mashiach, the one who is anointed. And so this would literally mean that the sons of Aaron are the ones that is designated as Kohen, and only the sons of Aaron. In verse 3, it says, whom he consecrated to minister as priests. Now, the idea to minister as priests means to act in the role. Now, you notice God is very specific. This is a mediation in the rituals, right? This would be the mediation in the rituals between man and God. And priests, or the Kohen, or the Kohanim in this case, in plural, are the ones that I guess you can say that these are what God has decided to appoint, right? To appoint by hand. God is the one who decided. Now, the difference between Israel and the neighbors is that the neighbors have their own priests who are nominated from the people, and because the gods are not real. But in the case of Israel, God is a true and living God, and the difference is that it is God who decided who do what and how he wants it done. And you remember, we have been talking about it throughout the book of Exodus, at least the last part of it, where we talked about the tabernacle, God's tabernacle, God's house, God's rules. Who does what is really God's prerogative. And so we have seen that the priesthood is God's prerogative to appoint, as opposed to the peoples around them. And so God is saying he has personally set them apart by hand to act the role as priests to mediate for the people. But something happened. Nadav and Abihu had died before the Lord when they offered profane fire in the wilderness of Sinai. And this would be an episode of Leviticus chapter 10. And we can now see that the book of Leviticus is in between the first few chapters of Numbers, as well as the last part of the book of Exodus. And sometime in between, this occurred where they offered profane fire, or what we call strange fire, and God devoured them, or God sent fire to destroy Nadav and Abihu, which would leave Aaron with number 3 and number 4. That is the essence of chapter 10 and chapter 11 of Leviticus, describing that event. Also, Nadav and Abihu had no children, so there are no more descendants from these two sons, or the eldest two sons of Aaron. And so Eleazar and Ithamar ministered as priests in the presence of Aaron, their father. And that would be the encapsulation of the children of Aaron. And it's important for us to realize one of the things you find is that there is no mention of the descendants of Moses anywhere. And it seems that the story of Moses eventually ended with the book of Deuteronomy. But the descendants of Aaron continued in the priesthood. Now, from verse 5 onwards, it is now a focus on the tribe of Levi, or what we call the Levites. The Levites are now set before God and says, present them before Aaron the priest, that they may serve him. Notice. And so what we do have is that we have God, we have Aaron, and then we have the sons who are also priests, and then we have the Levites. So the sons of Aaron would serve Aaron, and the tribe of Levi will also serve him. So each of them, like the sons of Aaron, are also priests, but the Levites are not priests. So we need to get this very clear in our minds. Is Aaron or the descendants of Aaron part of the Levites? Yes. But in this chapter, God distinguishes very clearly the importance of the descendants of Aaron because they will become the future priesthood. They have a very special role through the sons of Aaron, Eleazar and Ithamar. But there is a need for the rest of the Levites to work with Aaron. And so the head of this whole body of service in the tabernacle is led by Aaron. And so we call him the high priest eventually, right? Kohen Gadol. And then we have two groups. The sons will do the rituals and the Levites will do other things. What other things will the Levites do? So they shall attend to his needs, the needs of the whole congregation. Now, verse 7, when we talk about the needs, right? What exactly do they mean, right? To do the work of the tabernacle and to serve them before the tabernacle of the meeting. What are needs? Well, the idea here is, how should you say, is that it would more be, how do we say, they will be in charge of certain functions. I think that would be the idea here. These are certain specialized functions, right? These are functions or special functions with regards to the tabernacle. And it is not just the rituals. So there is a need to keep things clean, to wash, to clean, to protect the place, to defend the place. And so everything that is needed to operate the tabernacle is done between the two groups. Who are the two groups? The sons of Aaron and the Levites. Now, what else will the Levites do? They shall also attend to all the furnishings of the tabernacle of meeting and to the needs of the children of Israel to do the work of the tabernacle. Well, essentially 7 and 8 essentially are the same, right? One is the needs, then the furnishings, and you shall give the Levites to Aaron and his sons, and they are given entirely to him from among the children of Israel. You shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall attend to their priesthood. But the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. But outsider would be somebody who is not of Israel. Why is it so important? It's because God considers the children of Israel a holy nation. And they are the ones who can draw near to God to the tabernacle. And so the guarding of the tabernacle, the folding up of the tabernacle, the putting up of the tabernacle, the tearing down of the tabernacle, the cleaning of the things, the cleaning of the place where there is full of blood. All of these is a lot of work. The Levites are to do. Verse 11. It says here, then the Lord spoke to Moses. Now in verse 11, what did God say? And the word speak is to tell Moses about certain items. So now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel. And look at these words. Instead of every firstborn who opens the womb from among the children of Israel. And so God says, the Levites shall be mine, because all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I struck all of the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I set apart to myself all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. They shall be mine. And observe these words, Ani Yehovah. And so I would draw your attention to Exodus chapter 13 concerning the firstborn. The Passover is about the firstborn. God will strike the firstborn of the nation of Mizraim, which is Egypt. But in the houses of Israel, where they were bolder and honored God and slaughtered a he-goat or a male ram of 1 year and below, used the blood to spill on the lintel and the side posts, God will skip over them, and thereby their firstborn will not die. But the firstborn of the Egyptians will all die, including the firstborn son of the Pharaoh. In chapter 13, God then explained, all firstborn of Israel belongs to God. So this is what it says. All the firstborn are mine in verse 12. And this is in Exodus chapter 13, verse 2. It says, set apart all firstborn, whether man or beast, right? Man or beast, it will belong to God. And so God says, I have set aside to myself all the firstborn in Israel. So this is something that you need to go back and read Exodus chapter 13. But in this case, in chapter 3 of the book of Numbers, something happened. And God says, instead of every firstborn of the children of Israel, God says that I want the Levites from among the children of Israel. And this is important. This is important. Why is this important? So you need to go back to read Exodus chapter 32, the golden calf episode. What is so significant about the golden calf episode? And the golden calf episode is when God was so angry with the children of Israel when Moses was on top of Mount Sinai. They were serving the golden calf below. And so Moses went down, broke the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets. And then what did he do? Moses in verse 26 says, who is on God's side? Right? Who is on the Lord's side? You know the hymn, right? Who is on the Lord's side? Now in verse 27 to verse 28 comes the Levites. What happened was the ones who came over to Moses' side were all the Levites. And in verse 30, 27 and 28, Moses told the Levites to take the sword and to kill all of those who worship the idol, the golden calf. And that day, about 3,000 people died. And because of that episode, God is now saying, look, I want the Levites instead. And the Levites shall be mine in the place, right? In verse 13, in the place of the firstborn of Israel. So God says, I don't want the firstborn of Israel anymore, both man and beast. Now look at how ingenious God's way is. So we have Exodus chapter 32. We have Exodus chapter 12. Firstborn is God's. Numbers chapter 3. Levites belongs to God. And in that process, how does God move from firstborn to the Levites? And there is a principle of redemption. And this is very important because the concept of redemption means to return the firstborn to the families. That's what it means. Redemption is to return back to its original owner. And these firstborn really belongs to the family, and they can pay a price for that, and we'll see that later. And God just, with a stroke of a pen, says that I want now the Levites, and the firstborn can go back, and the Levites come to me. And we will look at this from verse 14 all the way down. In verse 14, God says, number the children of Levi by their father's house. Every male from a month old and above, God has chosen 1 month, right? Not 20 years. Because with Israel, he only wanted 20 years. And with 20 years, they are to be indication of inheriting the, the land. But a month old would belong to God because they would be dedicated for the purpose of the tabernacle. And look at this. Moses numbered them according to the word of the Lord. And I want to point out to you that in verse 16 onwards, the word of the Lord doesn't mean the word of the Lord. It means the mouth of the Lord. God actually, I guess the Jews believed that it was God who told Moses how to number them. Now, I would leave that to you, but I'm just sharing with you how I would understand how the Jews understand this. Moses was commanded to number, but how do you number people a month old because they are still breastfeeding and they are not weaned off? And it is not appropriate for Moses to just pop his head into the tent and say, oops, oh, I'm sorry, I just need to count. And so the Jews believed that as he passed by the tents of the Levites and there were male children, babies, God would tell Moses. And so this word is really mouth. God's mouth was the one who spoke about the numbers. In here, 3, and maybe that's how it's done. But at least that's what the Jews believe it to be. These are the sons of Levi by the names Gershon. And so I want to point your name to Gershon. And so if you have the time, follow the children of Gershon, right? There's also Kohath and Merari. These are the sons of Levi. Who are the sons of Levi? Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Why are they important? It's because the Levi himself is recorded in the book of Genesis. And so are the children. And so the children came out of Israel. And then you find that the sons of Gershon are now named. Gershon being the eldest son of Levi, Livni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath are these few. It's Amram, Itzhar, and here is Hebron, and here would be Uzziel. And the sons of Merari by the families, we have Machli and Mushi. And these are the families of the Levites by their father's house. So who is now present? It would be Livni and Shimei. And then Amram would be the eldest, right? These are the eldest. Merari would be Mahli. So Gershon, Kohath, and Merari would have died by now. In verse 21, very quickly, from Gershon came the family of the Levites and the family of the Shemites. These were the two sons. These were the families of who? Gershonites. And why is Gershon important? Because Gershon is the eldest son of Levi. And so you notice Aaron is the eldest son of his father. Gershon is the eldest son of the father. And so we are only interested to trace the eldest son of the tribe. And so Livni is the eldest son. And so they were numbering males from a month old and above, and there were 7,500. The families of Gershon will camp behind the tabernacle westward. The leader of the father's house of the Gershonites were Eliasaph, the son of Lael. And the duties, and so now we have duties assigned to them as well. The Levites' duties, by the way, would be in the tabernacle of meeting to take care of the tabernacle, the tent with its covering, the screen of the door of the tabernacle of the meeting, the screen of the door of the court, the hangings of the court around the tabernacle and the altar, their courts, all the work according to them. Why? So all of them would take care of one segment. And so this is what you can say that God is very, how should you say, very detailed. He allocates tasks that makes a lot of sense, right? From Kohath came the family of Arami, the family of Itzhari, and the family of Hebroni, and the family of Uzzili. And these are the Kohatites, right? Verse 27 says, these are the clan of Kohath. And the number from a month old and above were 8,600. And they will to take charge of the sanctuary, which is inside the tabernacle. And the families of the children of Kohath would camp on the south side of the tabernacle. And the leader of the father's house of the family of the Kohaths were Elizaphan, the son of Uzziel. And what do? They take care of the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, and the utensils of the sanctuary with which they ministered, the screen and all the work relating to them. That's inside the tabernacle. I think that should be clear. In verse 32, now we have Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest. No more the Levites, right? No more the Levites. Then the son of Aaron would be in charge over all the Levites, and particularly all those of the sanctuary, And this would be the Kohath, right? But from Merari is the family of Mali, and Mahli, and the family of Mushi. And these were numbered males from a month old above, 6,200. And the leaders were Zuriel, and son of Abihail. And They camped on the north side of the tabernacle, and they were supposed to take care of the boards of the tabernacle, the bars, the pillars, the sockets, the utensils, and all the work related to them, meaning putting it up, tearing it down, and all the pillars in the courtyard around it with their sockets, pegs, and the cord. So these were the specialists in tearing down and putting up. All right. Now in verse 38, we will talk about the last group. And the last group were to camp before the tabernacle on the east. Now always, before means to the front. In verse 38, it is to the front or the face of the tabernacle. The tabernacle will always face east, always, right? And east will be Kedem, right? And who were to camp there? Moses, Aaron, and his sons. And they are taking care of the sanctuary. They meet the work of the children of Israel with regards to the tabernacle. Notice this is not about anything else but the tabernacle. Every time you talk about the priests and the Levites, it is always the tabernacle. But the outsider, the non-Israelite, would not be able to come to this place. All who were numbered of the Levites, Moses and Aaron, were numbered at the commandment of the Lord. Now look at verse 39. This word, at the commandment of the Lord, is at the mouth of the Lord, not commandment. And it's the same word, right? Earlier on, God is actually telling Moses how many in the tent. So by their families, all the males from a month old and above. Remember, I said it's likely because Moses can't go in and pop his head in and interrupt the suckling of the young children. And so now we have 22,000. And so we need to make a bit of adjustment here. From verse 14 to verse 38 is the count. Gershon in verse 22. This would be 7,500. And then Kohath in verse 28. This would be 8,600. And then in verse 34, from Merari, we have 6,200. And all in all, we would have 22,300. However, we see here as 22,000, and this is what God said. Right? God said. And apparently, what God wanted was 22,000. So we have a difference of 300 people. And according to, well, I guess I can only tell you, Jewish sources was that this is the number that God wanted to serve in the tabernacle. And these were the firstborn as well, to be redeemed. And so they could go back to their families and no longer need to be in the tabernacle. Now, what really matters then is this, because how then would Moses be able to decide which 300 would be? And so there must be some mechanism, which we are not told, to separate 300 from the 22,300 people and return them back to their families, right? So that is one aspect that we need to pay attention to. So remember 22,000. In verse 40, then the Lord said to Moses, verse 40 is the beginning of another set of events now to consider the rest of the firstborn, because God said firstborn belong to me in Exodus 12. And now in Numbers 3, the Levites belong to me. And there needs to be a mechanism to return the firstborn back to the family. And so God says, number all the firstborn males. Now remember, the word firstborn is Bakor, right? Bakor. And they're only males, by the way. Females are not considered firstborn. Of the children of Israel, from a month old and above, and take the number of their names. Now, notice this is about a month old. In chapter 1 and 2, we're talking about 20 years old and above of all the males who are able to go to war, and that would be the lineage. And that is also how the land is going to be apportioned. But in this case, to counter, to even out the math, right? God does accounting, by the way. So there is a math of the firstborn, and then there is a math of the Levite. And we saw just now that the math of the Levite was 22,000, with 300 already done separately without saying. And now God says, number all the firstborn of children of Israel, which means that this would be the 11 tribes, right? The 11 tribes. And then you shall take the Levites for me, Ani Yehovah, instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites instead of the firstborn of the livestock. And so God wants the livestock, the beasts, and the men as well, firstborn. And instead of the firstborn, just swap. And swap what? Swap out the firstborn of men and animals with all the Levites, 22,000, not 22,300, with 22,000, and the livestock instead of the firstborn. And so that is the math accounting that God has. And so Moses numbered all of them, and all the firstborn male from a month old and above were 22,273. And so let's do the math here. Just now, when we were looking at the calculations, we found that in verse 39, the number of Levites that God wanted were 22,000. And now in verse 43, the firstborn is 22,273. And so with this, we find a difference of 273. And that's the number we need to now remember. There is a difference of 273. So let's continue in verse 44. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the Levites instead of all the firstborn of the children of Israel, and the livestock of the Levites instead of their livestock. The Levites shall be mine. I am the Lord. 46. And for the redemption of the 273 of the firstborn of the children of Israel, which are more than the number of Levites. So notice number of Levites in Verse 39 is 22,000. And here is an additional 273. And this is what God wants accounting for. And the word redemption is the one we want to pay attention to. God says that this is the word for it's paduim. Paduim really is a concept of ransom. In English, we call it ransom. It is to return to original state, right? Redemption is to return to original state. Now, in the concept of modern day, well, if you were to sell something to the shop and then you want to redeem it back, that is a concept of redemption where the goods return back to the original owner. And so here is that the firstborn God has taken away from the families. It says, all firstborn is mine, both man and beast. And now God says, now you can redeem and return back to your families. How many of them? Well, all of them, in fact. But if you take all of them and you less the number of Levites that God is taking in turn, instead of firstborn, God wants a Levite, there is a difference. Right? A difference of 273. And look at how God does the accounting. In this, you shall take 5 shekels for each one individually, and you shall take them of the shekel of the sanctuary, the shekel of 20 gerahs. And you shall give the money, which is the excess number of the redeemed, to Aaron and his sons. And so how many would this be? It would be 273 times 5 shekels. That would be how many? That would be 1,000 plus 350 plus 15. And this will give you 1,365 shekels. And so God says this is the redemption sum, where everyone can go back and the Levites come over, and the difference we square it off with 1,365 shekel of the sanctuary. And that is how God settled the accounting. Now, why is this important? Is because God doesn't close 2 eyes and say, oh, let's restart again. There is no control, alternate, delete, reset the whole equation. God doesn't do that. As the history progresses, God doesn't reset history. God will fix what is needed in a fair and just manner. And so this is God's way of accounting. And so we need to understand that God is truly a marvelous God who doesn't overburden the people, and yet God gets what he wants. And with the people serving him, or the right group of people serving him, and squaring off all the accounting journals. Now we look at verse 49. Moses then took the redemption money. Now we call it the redemption money. In Hebrew, this is called the silver of ransom or redemption. We probably have a different idea of redemption, but in chapter 3 of the book of Numbers, as well as in Exodus chapter 13, redemption or ransom comes from a word, pidom, right? Pidom. And pidom literally means to, well, let me put a different color. return to original owner. And so the children or the firstborn originally belongs to the parents. But God says, all firstborn is mine. And so God has taken over all the firstborn. Now, in inheriting the firstborn, because of the golden calf episode, God says, I don't want the firstborn anymore. I'm going to let you all go, but I want all the Levites, all 22,000 of the Levites. And so in exchange for the Levites, God says, all of you Israelites, you can now redeem your sons. Return back to the original owner. Each one give 5 shekels of the sanctuary, and they are all returned back. And so that would be the squaring of the accounting. From those who were over and above those who were redeemed by the Levites, from the firstborn of the children of Israel, he took the money. And this would be 1,365 shekels of the sanctuary. And this is important. And you've seen how to count this, right? This is 273 times 5. That's your math. And so God is very good in his math. And Moses gave their redemption money to Aaron and his sons according to the word of the Lord. Now understand this. In verse 51, again, the commands of the Lord came from the mouth of the Lord. And that would be passed over to Aaron and his sons according to the mouth of the Lord. And this is what God has commanded Moses. And Moses did exactly as he was told. And Moses also had the partnership of God going into every tent. And so the Jews believe, telling him how many of these are young ones who are still suckling their mother. And hence we have the concept of redemption. When the children of Israel was redeemed, what that means is that they will return back to the original land where Jacob came from. And that would be the promised land. And so they are about to go back to the promised land. So in Exodus chapter 12 and 13, we read about the redemption of Israel, besides the redemption of the firstborn. And so redeem, redemption, ransom, all come from the same word, pidom, which means to return to the original state or the original owner or the original place. For Israel from Egypt back to the promised land. For the firstborn to be going back to their families. And with this comes a demonstration of how detailed God is with regards to what he wants done. God's house, God's rules. If he wants 22,000, then it'll be 22,000. And we're not told what happened to the 300 anyways. And there were many things we're not told. But all we need to know is there are 22,000 people to serve in the sanctuary for throughout the entire year of 360 days. And that would also be the number of Levites that we hear of the Temple Institute in Israel training for the purposes of the temple. And so that number comes from Numbers chapter 3. And with this, the money goes to Aaron to facilitate all the functions of the temple, and thereby we will begin to appreciate that all these are, I guess they are very important, right? They are very important to be used in the temple because money is needed, right? Money is needed. And this is really money, nothing to do with the tithes. This money is for the purposes of the sanctuary. The tithes are for the purposes of the Levites. All right. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 3.